Hello, everyone. This is Dr. Bridget Cole-Williams, and this is Courage in Cannabis. We are doing community stories today, really discussing incredible stories of everyday people that share how cannabis has had an influence on their lives. And today, we will have my special co-host that is always great to work with. Michael J. Green is with us today. Hi, Michael. How are you?
I'm great. Great to see you.
Absolutely. It's always great to see you. We've worked together, I don't know, for a couple of years now.
Yeah.
You with the traveling cannabis bookstore, Cannabis Libris. If you want to share a little bit about what you're doing with that.
Not doing quite as much as I'd like. COVID kind of threw a little wrench in how often I get out and where I get to. I was
Mhm.
recently in Kansas City, however, for cannabis science. Ran a lot of old friends, made some new connections. Fun, but typically what I'm trying to do is bring books topically on cannabis across the spectrum, from medicine to culinary to public policy, cooking, spirituality, whatever might be involved, all the facets of life it seems to impact and touch. And
Mhm.
it's fun. I'm
Yeah,
passionate about
absolutely.
it. I have a good time. Yeah, it's fun.
And you get to meet incredible authors, and a lot of your books are signed by authors as well.
Absolutely. I have Courage in Cannabis was sold very, very well in Kansas City, by the way, excuse me. But
Very good.
yeah, so it's a traveling book show. That's the
Absolutely. No, I love that. I love that. And definitely look for the Cannabis Libris online as well, and to learn, more about where you're going and what's going on. And so before we get into our special guest today, I do want to make mention of our sponsors that allow us to do everything that we're doing now, which we have the Compass Naturals, Indovibe, Cannabis Centers, Spender, the Canamom Show, Believe, 614 Network, Cannabis BPO, Columbus Botanical Depot, as well as Daga Digital Marketing, Hempbox, etc., Ohio Medical Marijuana Physicians Association, and DustinCava.com. So we're excited to have our sponsors that bring so much to our show and allow us to do what we're doing. So with that being said,
and
you
before
met
you
this
say it,
wonderful person in Kansas City.
right, Nailah Smith, who I
Yes,
met there, by the way. So this is worthwhile.
this is worthwhile. Okay.
Absolutely.
Well, Nailah, welcome to our show today. How are you?
Thank you so much for having me. I am blessed to be here.
Yeah, very good. So tell me a little bit about how the two of you met, and we'll kind of dig into your work and where you fit into the cannabis space.
Yeah, so I was being a little nosy Nancy at the cannabis conference, and I went into the exhibit hall a little bit early, and I saw all of his amazing spread of books. And when I
Mhm.
tell you an amazing spread, like an amazing spread
Yeah.
of books.
Mhm.
Um, and I took my little video. I got so excited, and I was like, "Okay, I know what I'm coming back for." I was like, "Oh, are they just giving these out for free?" But I was like, "No, these probably like cost some money, right?" So I waited my turn, and I went to go see him, and we just started chatterboxing it up as I usually do. And come to find out, he was in Virginia. I'm in DC, so it was perfect. It was a perfect connection from there.
Absolutely, absolutely. And honestly, my how I met Michael was very similar, but I was out in San Francisco and I had heard about him before, right?
Oh, okay.
So when I saw this, like you said, it's a massive spread, right? When
It's
the holding
incredible.
is there,
Incredible.
and then said, "It's you," which I think that's always weird, when
Right.
someone does that to you, right? It was like, "It's you," and you're like, "Is it me? I don't know, is it me?" Right?
Mhm.
But always a great conversation, so easy to talk to.
So
And
easy.
immediately I get, this message from, Michael sharing, you gotta meet Nailah. You have to talk to her. And so it's great to be able to share you with everyone else today. So I'm excited about that. So
Me
tell us a little bit about what you do?
Yes, so I was at the Cannabis Science Conference to talk about. So I'm a speech language pathologist by trade.
Mhm,
If you guys are unfamiliar with that, it's basically, I like to say it's basically like, occupational therapy or physical therapy, but for speech, language, and swallowing.
mhm,
So I primarily work with my heart is with children on the spectrum,
mhm,
specifically in social communication and things like that. So I was presenting on my master's thesis, and my master's thesis was about looking at the perceptions and attitudes of families with acquired or developmental neurological brain conditions and how they feel about cannabis therapy. Cannabis for me, I'm from Los Angeles, California.
mhm.
I grew up with my grandpa growing cannabis in the backyard and him smoking it without me even knowing what it is. So for me, it's always been a medicine. I always preface this, I didn't grow up with the stigma attached to it,
Mhm.
which I think kind of helped me to just do the project outright um, with the sensitive topic of cannabis, right? So what I did was I interviewed some parents of children on the spectrum.
Mhm.
And I interviewed one client with a traumatic brain injury, and I talked to them about how they felt about cannabis. So before this, I did a lot of in-depth research, literature review on anything having to do with cannabis and social communication,
Let me
cannabis
ask
and
you about that. So, like in your research,
Mhm.
you're looking into where does cannabis fit in into the work that you do as far as speech and neurological issues that affect speech, correct? So,
Yeah.
what things were you finding when you were doing your research?
So I found that not only do people not know that cannabis is a medicine, but that they have other alternative options from pharmaceutical medications
Mhm,
and things like that that give a lot of adverse side effects, right? Um, I noticed that people were very apprehensive. People did not have a lot of knowledge about how cannabis works or
mhm.
how it even interacts with the body, right? Not everybody reacts the same way, especially when it comes to our neurologically affected folks. Um,
Absolutely.
and that it can be helpful as well. There's also a lot of news stories
Mhm,
about children whose parents are giving them cannabis, and it's like a magic, like, oh my gosh, I gave my kid a brownie and I was so concerned and I didn't know what was going to happen, and all of a sudden he just stopped hitting himself. You know what I'm
mhm,
saying? It was a lot of stories like that. So I really wanted to look at it from um, the user's perspective, from our actual clientele as speech pathologists.
mhm.
And in this, current climate, a lot of parents are moving out of harmful pharmaceuticals and into cannabis for their neurologically affected individuals. As a
Right.
speech
Yeah.
pathologist, I see kids on the spectrum twice, 2 to 3 times a week. I'm
Right.
seeing a lot more than their, regular physicians.
Mhm.
So we're going to see that change in their behavior um, pretty soon, right? Or you should be. I mean, we should
Now.
be within
Yeah.
it. We
Yeah.
would hope.
So let me just to kind of put this in the right perspective.
Yeah.
So you did research with patients and patients' families on their attitude and beliefs around cannabis as a medicinal option.
Mhm.
Originally, you're from California,
Mhm.
and you didn't grow up with the stigma, which that in itself is just fascinating. Like,
Yeah.
Absolutely.
right? But because the stigma, like
I'm
I still,
definitely the enigma. Is it not enigma, but the
yeah,
monopoly.
yeah.
Monopoly. I can't
No,
think of the
I
word.
mean
I'm
to
so
to
sorry.
not have the grow up with the stigma that you are an enigma. I mean,
Yeah.
who like particularly I'm in the Midwest. Okay.
Yeah.
So to not grow up with the stigma where I still think reefer madness is not that far. I don't even want to say it's behind us. I still
It's
think
not.
it has a pulse.
Yes.
Okay. Where were you doing your research? Because I'm curious, where are these people from?
Yes, so that was something that came up in my actually in my defense.
Mhm,
One of the questions that they asked me was towards the end, if I could do this again, what would I do differently? And I said that I would interview people on the West Coast. So right now I'm in DC, the
Oh, I
DMV,
see.
Maryland, Virginia area, and everyone was pretty much, in the Maryland area. All my
Right.
clients were
So
from.
like your results might be slightly skewed or might be different
Absolutely.
if
I feel
you.
like they're definitely skewed because of where I'm at.
Mhm,
And the sample that I had, they were clients from my from the practice that I work with. So I
mhm,
was very familiar with them, and I
mhm,
had a relationship with them before, which I think is another something else that came out of my research. Another finding is the importance of the relationship with your clinician, right? To
mhm,
really have that open dialogue, to be able to open up and say, hey, like, I'm giving my kid this cannabis. I just wanted to let you know if you notice any, changes, to like let me know. Um,
mhm.
and that was really the point of it, just to let clinicians know that you will be seeing this happen if they're open enough to, open
Listen,
up
the
about it. Right?
toothpaste is smashed and that it's all over the room and the wall that you cannot get it back in at this point, right? And any practitioner that wants to pretend this isn't happening, that isn't willing to see medicinal possibilities, or at the minimum be able to acknowledge their patient's questions. And if it's not for them or in their wheelhouse to understand or share, send them to a practitioner that can share and help, right?
You literally just read off.
Pretend this isn't happening at this point.
Yeah, you
Let
literally
me
just
ask
read
you a
off the
question.
recommendations for my research. Like, that was literally what I said for my recommendations.
Go
Let
ahead,
me ask you
Michael.
a question in that regard. So you're the speech therapist. You have this
Mhm,
clientele. You're working with a
mhm.
physician, and you're communicating with the physician. They're now using cannabis. How does that in fact happen? Do you not need a referral from the physician first? Does it depend on the locality, or is it the parents doing this? Is this just a
So
recommendation?
this is where
What's
me as a yeah, sorry to cut you off. This is where me as a I'm also a cannabis consultant. I was
Mhm,
trained by the amazing Dr. Pepper Hernandez at the
yeah.
Humboldt Holistic Cannabis Holistic Institute in Humboldt, California. So shout
mhm,
out to them. I literally owe Dr. Pepper my life.
mhm,
She helped me a lot with this research too. But so no, and that's always what people are like when they come when I present, because I presented this before at speech conferences. They're like, one of the questions that I get is, well, do you just like come up and ask the parents if they want to try cannabis? No. Let's back up a little bit. Let's start
mhm,
from square one.
mhm.
Um, I think that your client could be a great candidate for cannabis. Have you considered cannabis therapy? If the conversation comes up of, alternative medications or pharmaceuticals or anything like that, that's when I would say, oh, well, have you thought about something natural? Have you thought about this? It's almost like when parents ask about allergies. We get a lot of questions about allergies because that congestion can affect your um, your speech production, right?
Mhm, mhm.
Um, well, have you tried, lemongrass or this or that? Just giving them options. Yes, cannabis is an option. Now, depending on where you are, if it's legal, I'm not giving out legal advice or anything like that. I'm just saying that you can point them in a helpful direction, and to be open um, to the suggestion, right? And
So
to be
basically, you may be the one suggesting it, or maybe someone else, what have you. But at some point or another, these patients or the family or whatever seeks out cannabis as an option for their child, or if they're the patient themselves. Is that
right.
right?
So
And
as a speech pathologist, I don't recommend or prescribe. I definitely recommend talking to your physician, of course,
Mhm.
about it. Um, yeah. My
Let me
master's
see.
my
Assuming
master's is
they
inquiry.
obtain it. And so then this either in communication or from their chart or something along. Okay. And so you interviewed people for your research that were already using cannabis, or some were and some weren't?
So one of my clients, the adult, he had used it previously. Um, and after he used it like when in his teen years, he was like an adult. In
Mhm.
his 40s, he used it in his teen years and then had the TBI, and he stopped He stopped before he had the TBI. And then everyone else, I had one family that was very familiar with it, that had tried multiple options. And then everyone else was pretty much new to it. They'd heard of it, or they had had a large stigma associated with it. And in my research, I also gave them an educational presentation in between. So I started off asking them what they knew about it, how they felt about it. I gave them the educational presentation. I basically laid out everything there is to know. I kind of debunked what marijuana, like that term, really means. Just to give them a little. I didn't want to give them too much political, like, debunking. But I did tell them that, and I told them the biological differences in your endocannabinoid system, differences in autism, just as an example. And then after the presentation, I asked them how they felt about it. And a lot of them were very much so more interested in finding out more. I don't know if you guys are familiar with Epidiolex, but I included that in my...
So Epidiolex is a FDA-approved liquid medication for children with 2 specific types of seizures. Okay. And so, and there is some off-label usage of it, but for the most part, it's for 2 specific types of seizures that people can get in the US at any time. So anyhow, go ahead.
Yeah. So that was included in one of my families, who has a client with, who has a specific type of seizure disorder, was really, really interested in that one. Like after we finished all the processes, like all the steps of my research, she still was like following up about it, which showed me that she was still really interested and willing to try. So, another thing that people are willing to try new things once they're educated on it, of course.
Absolutely. So after the research, did you find people then there were some people that were already on it or had tried cannabis at some point. After you doing this and realizing that people tended to be a little bit more open or had questions, were you able to follow up later and see if there were some people that were starting to adapt this?
I didn't follow up, but I think that would be something important to do. I don't believe that any of them are using it, to be honest with you. I don't think that has changed. I don't think that has changed, but just to give them the insight and to let them know that the option is there was more than I didn't think I was going to get any participants, to be honest, when I came up with this idea. I didn't know if I was going to get it through IRB, you know what I'm saying? So just completing it. But I do have some families that I'm still working with that weren't included in my sample that I'm working with to help them find, better access to other things who do want to follow through.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, I think just the people need to get education in different places.
Absolutely.
And one thing that I feel very strongly about, we do a lot of, we talk about obviously people in the industry being educated, the bud tender that's interacting with patients being educated. Obviously, practitioners need to be educated, but I'm always very interested in the frontline person, because the frontline person can make or break whether the patient then follows through to even connect with a practitioner. And so frontline is someone like yourself, someone that's interacting with a patient, helping them with a condition, and has either an opinion or education, right? And if you were sitting there and said, "Oh, that's the worst idea ever. Oh, what are you talking about? Your kids are going to be drug addicts." And, if you did that, it's over, right?
You'd be surprised how many people said that in my research as well when they inquired about it to their physicians. The client with the seizure disorder, she actually had asked her primary care physician, I believe, if cannabis would be good for her son. And the physician basically said, no, not for your specific type of seizure disorder. And he just said, like, cannabis, period. And if you know anything about cannabis and the brain and seizures, that's just like, where did he get that from?
Yeah.
It's
Yeah,
like, where did you get that? It
Denial.
wasn't in a book. I don't think
Yeah,
that was in a
just because it's been approved for 2 types of seizures does not mean that it could not be helpful for other types. And just because it's been approved for those 2 types does not mean it's gonna work for those 2 types, right?
Exactly.
So to say that it's not an option at all isn't probably very fair. Like,
It's
if
not.
anything, we call it practicing medicine for a reason, right?
Yes.
That we don't have all the answers, but we
Yes.
have the resources and the ability to work with people in a safe manner. And so
Yes.
to shut someone down too quickly, particularly when there's so limited
Mhm.
medical options for some conditions like epilepsy, or the options that we have available can be so toxic and difficult for children or adults to
Mhm.
take. We need to keep the door open to other options.
Absolutely. I
Do we
totally
have
agree.
do we have any notion how, and maybe I'm jumping ahead or perhaps I missed something. So you have a child that presents with
Mhm.
a condition that you're a therapist for, speech impediment or perhaps seizures disorder that you're speaking about. How does one determine, and you probably know the answer to this, perhaps Bella, certainly better than I would, Bridget, how do you go about finding a dosage for a child or treating a specific
Yeah, let's
condition? I
not
mean,
even go there.
right? It's a
I get.
reaction, it's a tough one, right? Because we don't
Mhm.
have enough
I mean, we do
time
have
doing.
some guidelines, and I do start with the guidelines, and basically there's some calculations that we use, of course, a lot based on weight and, age and what have you. But if you want me to tell you that is like a golden rule that works
I
it's
know
not
that.
like antibiotics, right? If I know your weight, I can calculate this. I can pretty much tell you you're taking amoxicillin this weight, it's going to get rid of your infection most of the time. It's a little bit trickier with cannabis, unfortunately.
Okay, and
Yeah.
how would it be administered? I can't see these kids rolling and smoking, so I'm assuming it's a gummy or an edible of some sort or a tincture.
Mhm.
I'm
Tinctures,
curious.
yeah,
So and one of the
typically.
reasons I ask, I have a grandson with a speech impediment. He's not yet 7. I have not had
Mhm,
this discussion about this possibility. He's taking some speech therapy, and I can't put a name to the condition. Just the way
mhm,
his voice comes out sounds like he's much younger than the 7
mhm.
almost is. So there's probably a name for that phenomena. I don't know. It has to do with
Dysphonia, I
maturity.
believe. Aphonia,
Pardon?
dysphonia. It's dysphonia or aphonia. It's with the
Yeah,
phonation
all
of
right.
your voice. That's what it sounds like to me.
Exactly.
Just off of
Goes to the
listening.
vocal cords. I don't know. But I mean, seems to me like you've stepped in it, Nailah. You've walked into this can of worms and opened up, you know, this
I
mushroom
have.
of sorts, no pun intended. And it's fascinating because it's not only related to your branch of practice in therapy, but all kinds of therapies across the spectrum, so to speak,
Mhm,
in the human condition. And some things we've known for thousands of years. Well, not so
Mhm.
much our society. It's been known by other societies for thousands of years. There are medical conditions that can be treated with cannabis and cannabinoids. Yet
mhm.
here's a specific area. When I encountered you in Kansas City, I mean, you blew me away with this. I'm sitting here, no way.
Yeah.
It was like hard for me to wrap my mind around the reality of this. you know. So number one, kudos for you for willing to talk about courage in cannabis, for be willing to go there. And secondly, like, wow, you punched the hole in it. Or if you opened the door, I guess that's a better expression. In the room.
I think it was more of a punch. I feel like it was more of a punch because I was punching through to get this approved. Well, not approved. I shouldn't say approved, but the amount of how do I say this? Apprehension
Yeah.
or just people not like just prejudgment, right? People always
Yeah.
want to prejudge, especially with cannabis. Especially with cannabis. Now, it was a lot to even get people to listen to listen to hear why it's important, right?
Mhm.
Um, So
So
yeah, I don't mind breaking down the walls. I was punching through all day long.
with your advisor, or where did you have the most difficulty?
Just the regulating systems is really
At the university.
well, I'm not going to say at the university in particular, but the I'll say the process for research approval, they kept giving me the same stuff. And it wasn't even like they kept giving me the same corrections over and over and over again. I kept having to telling them, like, I'm not giving them any cannabis, guys. Like, I'm just going to be asking them questions about cannabis. Like this,
Mhm.
I'm not administering, I'm not giving any kids anything. That's the first question I always get. You gave some kids some weed? No, I did not. I did not. I'm not licensed to do that. Like, I cannot.
I don't know why it gets so crazy.
It
I
gets
feel
so
like
crazy.
say the word, you are already a drug dealer and you're guilty, as charged, right? I mean, simply by saying the word. And like even with our, book series, people were selling, copies of their book that they're in on, using their PayPal. And 3 of our authors, PayPal got shut down indefinitely.
Mm,
Because of the name of the book,
mm.
right? And if you read the book, it is not promoting excessive use, or they're just inspirational stories of what people have experienced. Nothing, no recipes. Although it sounds like a great idea, I would love to do a recipe book, but no recipes or any of the sort. But simply by using the word, you have already put yourself into a category. And so in doing that, have you had moments of second guessing? Have you been stressed about what this means to your career, and how have you handled that?
Absolutely. All of the above. Yes. Even
course.
when I was, I did this in my master's program when I was getting clinically trained to be a speech pathologist. I was like, is anyone going to accept me? Like, can I even work anywhere? With this being my line of research, I'm not gonna bring this into anyone else's, practice. It's my thing. It's my like my love project, I think is what they call it. But
Yeah, passion project.
passion project. Thank you. It was my passion project. And that's definitely been a concern. I've gotten, well, you can't, what's cannabis going to do? You can't just do cannabis in speech forever. It's a very formal profession. Speech pathologist is a very formal profession. It's a lot of regulations, strict rules, the laws and things like that as well. For speech pathologists, getting reimbursed from insurance. That's a big topic too.
So like you mentioned insurance, you can't talk about insurance in cannabis. And again, now there's trouble that's starting, right? Although it will not always be that way, but I can imagine the stress that has caused. I just kind of a side note, like Michael, did you feel that way, kind of getting involved and because if you may or may not know, Michael J. Green is a former judge and attorney and, all of the above. And so certainly at some point you had a question of, what does this mean? Or were you like, I paid my dues, screw it all?
Kind of the second one. Paid my dues, screw it all. It became apparent to me, same thing, talk about stigma. As a kid, young man, reefer madness was something I believed once upon a time, that my parents, they bought that line. Who didn't? How many people in this country bought that? And for maybe all the right reasons. I mean, that's what's being thrown at you. You're looking at benevolent government looking out for you. You don't know about all the things behind the scenes that just didn't come out. You don't know the history of Harry Anslinger, et cetera, et cetera. Without going along history, as I think I've mentioned before, I was home on leave before shipping out to Vietnam, and I had an occasion with family members to smoke a joint. I got pretty high. I mean, like, whoa, I'm sitting there playing cards in his hearts, I believe, and I'm laying cards out, and I have no clue whether there's anything rational between what I'm doing. My heart is going, like pumping, mile a minute. I hear this in my head, and my mind feels like it's an elevator going up, just shooting a rocket, loaded. All right, so that was, one night Well, I was home on leave. By the time I got to Vietnam, uh, it went ashore for the first time. The first person I encountered, Marine, with a couple of buddies, was walking by a bunch of sandbags on a pier. Hey guys, you want some weed? My friends we all looked at each other. Oh my God. Well, of course. You got a 20 pack? He'd been there before. Package of Marlboro, pre-rolled cigarettes in a Marlboro package, 20 joints. That must have been like $4 or $5, 3 tokes. I was gone. Just over the rainbow. Totally gone in Vietnam, in a putt-putt, going to the beach and sitting there thinking, I'm in Vietnam. Where I wasn't particularly a war zone, but occasionally there were sappers, people got hurt, things blew up, and I'm thinking, what the hell am I doing here? So I had some exposure during the service. By the time I got out and got to college, 1973, everybody was smoking weed. That's simple in Tucson, Arizona. And it wasn't long before I became something of an activist. I found for myself, readjusting to society, that was like my therapy. I spent a lot of time trying to readjust. I'd been institutionalized for 6 years. When to eat, when to go to bed, where to be, what to dress, how to dress, and I didn't realize that, for fact, I had been institutionalized in a manner of speaking, understanding the insanity of the war. And I found that very helpful. Just walking through a door, I'd be present.
See, and that's what people don't know. And I think that is a really important point to share, that everyone assumes everyone's just over here, just high, just as a kite, right?
Yeah.
So many people, particularly people that are dealing with high anxiety, pain, PTSD, they're just trying to get a level of normal to be able to interact with everybody else at where they think everyone else is functioning at. And that it's not about the high, it's about being able to be balanced enough to survive, to be honest. Right?
Yes.
And that's a huge difference.
Yeah. I think you bring up 2 important points. I think, well, just to piggyback off of Dr. Bridget, I always say, what's the word, everybody? Say it with me, homeostasis. Balance. Right. We all just want balance, right? But I think, Michael, you bring up a great point about war veterans and how they utilize cannabis and how there's a whole identity around war veterans and the use of the medicine.
Yes.
Yeah. That's a topic that's a whole show in itself.
That's a whole nother subject in itself. But just the fact, I find it interesting that you're saying by 1973 and going to college, and I've looked at these numbers, right? And there was a spike in cannabis use during that time. It was a little bit better normalized than obviously the 40s, 50s, 60s. It was kind of creeping in. So what I find interesting is that by the time I was in college in 1990s, so this is post drug war, the numbers were actually really pretty down.
Yes.
Okay. So of course people were still like, cannabis has never taken a complete hike, right? But the numbers dropped significantly in the 90s because this was post war on drugs. There was this there was, everything was related to that. And so my experience, well, obviously it was different from yours, Michael, because to say it was almost like it was unsaid. We knew that there were some people that used, we knew that there's some people that sold it, but it was kind of like and I mean, I might have been a goody two shoes. I don't know,
You probably were. But that's, let me take this a little further. I don't mean to cut you off, but I recall people getting high, laughing, giggling, having a great time. And here I am smoking with other friends, but becoming introverted, coming in. What the hell is my problem here? What am I getting? And I did not smoke. I've never smoked. Well, there's been occasions, but generally I do not smoke copious amounts of marijuana or cannabis. I use it. It enhances my life. That much I have learned. But it took me a long while to actually be comfortable with that. I remember one of the great things that came out of cannabis for me. I was in law school. I was in my studying con law, and I kind of knew I am going to crash and burn in that course. And a friend of mine, young woman who was a year ahead of me, said, Michael, why don't you make me dinner? I'll come over and I'll help you cram for this test, con law.
Mhm.
You'd have the year before. Walks in the door, we have dinner, says, smoke this, gives me a joint. And then gives me an hour and a half tutorial in constitutional law. What I really need to know, and some of this was vaguely familiar. I'd read the material. I aced the damn exam. Thank her very much. I won't name her. She's entitled to her anonymity as a judge these days. But God bless her. And this is cannabis. All right. I hate to admit it. Contrary to what Kevin Sabet would offer to you, lack of motivation, how it kills you. He may be right. I only graduated with a 3.89. If I would not have been smoking that dastardly weed or smoking that, I might have nailed a 4.0. Okay.
Absolutely.
All I could do was summa cum laude. All right. I could have been the valedictorian if I would have not smoked that stuff. What can I tell you?
Look at you. Brain damage. Clearly.
Brain damage. Clearly. Totally wrecked. So there's a lot to be said for it. It's medicine. And that's what Dennis Perone, went back to that. I picked up on his name years ago during the AIDS crisis. And his statement was the first thing that resonated with me when I heard this person in San Francisco saying it's all medicine. By its very nature, going back to the endocannabinoid system, which we discovered later, homeostasis, balance, maybe not for everybody, and certainly not necessarily in copious amounts. And, it's a learning process, But
it is a learning process.
What I find interesting that, I'm sorry, Michael, I didn't hear the last part.
The focus. I mean, cannabis provided me focus. Here I am reading like a maniac, taking 18 to 21 hours a semester because I'm behind 6 years in no school. I'm 6 years behind everybody. I want to get in and out. And I did that in 2 years. I never did not go to school during those 2 years.
That's amazing.
I'm smoking weed. You shouldn't be doing. It clearly deprives you of motivation, obviously. Comprehension, short-term memory, out the door. This stuff is
But you weren't smoking the weed that we have today.
That's true.
And you probably didn't know what you were smoking as well, which is another.
That's right.
People just don't know what they're smoking. Like there's all the cross germinations of seeds. There's so many seeds out there today. Like it's so hard to track.
But this is what kind of hits me. Like all of the work, and like you said, there's so many thousands or more types of seeds out there, right? Exactly. The energy that's been put to make these amazing high 35 plus percent, plants of THC, if that same focus was strictly medicinal, can you imagine how much further we would be ahead medically? If I work with caregivers in Michigan, right? So they're literally growing for the patients that they're serving, and they're looking for things that will produce certain terpenes in high amounts, and certain levels of THC and CBD and what have you, right? And when I see the work that they put into really trying to find plants that work for the patients that they're serving, if we had done that collectively, if we had said, hey, wait, let's figure out how we can do this so it can help people better with arthritis or with seizures or what have you, we would be so much further ahead medically than we are right now.
Yeah. If terpene tracking was like a practice, or terpene, like tracking and terpene matching, if that was like a practice, that would be amazing. I do think though that medically, I wonder if people thought that they were getting ahead with, the Delta 9s and the Delta 8s and all the isolates and all those.
Ahead like how?
Well, like isolating the compounds to just get that little thing that you need, right? Like it's just a little pick me up, right? But like, no, we don't want just the isolate. You need the whole plant medicine. That's what people don't realize.
You need the whole plant
medicine,
Right, right. I mean, I
And how many?
understand isolation in the sense, like, you need to isolate things to understand what each piece does medically, but,
Sure.
as far as how well it works better together than it does apart, and I feel like we're missing if we're talking about it affecting the endocannabinoid system, that's really about balance, I mean, I don't know what the long-term picture is gonna be on this,
Mm,
but my thought is that if THC suppresses receptors, okay, and we know this, so
mhm.
we tell people to take tolerance breaks.
Yep.
CBD can help repair it, but THC will suppress your natural endocannabinoid system. I don't know if we have a clear idea about, because it's literally the umbrella system, right? It's
Mhm.
bringing about that balance throughout every other system in our body. When we're suppressing that system and we're suppressing those, like, our natural endocannabinoids, because we're like, oh, you've got THC on board all day. We don't even have to make that. I don't know what the long term true results are of that, right? Because if your natural system isn't working at full function, what does that mean for somebody, right? If
Mhm.
we're only using cannabis and only taking these, rare, like Delta 8, yeah, it's in the plant, but I don't think we're ever meant to just take it by itself, right? It's
No.
in very small quantities. What does that mean in the long run? Because our natural system cannot be acting on full capacity. It just can't be.
Yeah. Yeah.
I would agree with you, but the question becomes then, so we're now at what, about 150 cannabinoids? I don't know, I have a recent count. You know,
Mhm.
8 years ago, it was 90. Then suddenly it was 113, then
Right,
131, 140,
right.
maybe 150. And we've identified, we know a lot of people will mention the CBG besides the CBD, et cetera, et cetera. But how many
Mhm.
more of these cannabinoids don't we know what their effect is? And it's my
Absolutely.
understanding, so correct me if I'm wrong, my understanding is you want some THC, that's what activates the receptors.
Mhm.
At some
Mhm.
point, perhaps suppresses them too much,
Mhm.
like too
Right.
much of anything. If you want to
Like,
treat it like a
well,
medicine, then, honor it for what it is.
Yeah.
But again, it's impacting different individuals different ways. Some people are lactose intolerant. Some people need to be or desire to be gluten free. There may
mhm.
be those of us in the population that probably shouldn't be touching this.
Mhm.
Yes.
Perhaps. I don't know. I'm not a
Mhm.
doctor.
Well,
I can't
yes.
scientist. I can't make those pronouncements. But it's like this cornucopia that has all these wonderful things in it. But there admittedly are some things we don't know. But by and large, in
Yes.
my own personal experience and what I've
Right.
viewed and people I've encountered over the years, especially through my participation at these conferences and books and conversations I've had, you know, anecdotally, what I'm hearing and then hearing from veterans, I'm involved with a number of those and how they're dealing with PTS or
Yes.
opiate problems, other addiction problems, alcoholism. They're
Yes.
positive things. But people
Mhm.
are learning to adjust and
Mhm.
expanding their own knowledge about what is involved. What are the terpenes I want to take?
Yep.
You know, is there something better? And how high is THC? I found if I smoke 28% THC, if it's narrow leaf sativa based, I get real clear. I'm more
Mm,
comfortable, happier,
Mhm.
but like 15 or 16%. That's like,
mhm.
for me, a really nice. I don't even want to call it a
So you're
buzz.
saying that 28% is better, you have a better feeling and you feel more balanced than at the 16%?
No, I
Is
like
that what
16 overall. What I've said, what I meant to try to indicate, I've bought some very high THC just to see what the hell that would be like. You know,
you're
something to smoke. That's how I take it. And I remember smoking some Dr. Goodchem that was 28%.
Mhm.
And I'm looking at this thing, take a couple of hits, I should be gone. I'm 2 hits and I'm there.
Yeah.
Mhm.
Nothing. Another hit. I'm in Colorado driving to Tucson. I got 2 days to do it, so I don't care how long it takes. And next thing I know, I am buzzed, but I'm like just clear,
Mhm.
not feeling stoned, if you will, if there's a way to describe the difference. Just
Yeah. It's called
really
your
clear.
minimally effective dose, and I talk about this with my
Mhm.
cannabis clients
And
as
it's
well.
like,
Is
wow, how good is
Mhm.
this? I
It's
still
just
prefer
finding the
smoking.
littlest bit that gets you
Yeah,
there.
That exactly right.
So
And your friends will look at me and go, I claim to smoke less than 2 ounces a year. Swear.
yeah.
That's maybe my
A
consumption.
year?
Yeah, a year. I smoke very little. It's been probably 4 or 5 days since I've had a toke.
Mm-hmm.
Because I'm kind of like, I don't want to say I'm naturally there. It's kind of like I feel.
You are. You are. It's okay. Just say you got it like that. You woke up like this. You woke up like this. That's what that's what you gotta say.
Yeah, and the yoga doesn't hurt. And the yoga doesn't hurt. And
yoga,
it's like,
but you know what? The yoga is tapping into your endocannabinoid system as well. And so in some
Absolutely.
ways you are already there. And I do think that we need to educate people not just about cannabis, but other ways that we
Yes.
can activate our endocannabinoids. If you're really about this, then
Yeah.
you should really have knowledge about how this affects how your endocannabinoid system can be excited in other ways as well, right?
Absolutely.
Exactly.
Absolutely. So when you're looking, Nailah, at like the patients that you have, adults, children, what have you, and as we get more and more closer to recreational across the US, the one thing that I see is a lot of the lower THC products, a lot of the more medicinal products start to disappear because they don't make as much money.
Mhm.
And so that's got to be difficult
Very,
from your perspective.
very.
And I'm not just talking about flower, I'm talking about
Everything. Yep.
everything.
Exactly.
Even the edibles too. It's funny. It's interesting. The topic of edibles came up in my during my talk.
Mhm.
And a lot of people are saying that now people want to phase out of the sugary gummies and the cookies and the brownies because it's too much sugar.
Mhm.
And it's inevitably not healthy, and it affects everybody differently, right? It's like a lot of extra stuff in it. But yeah, the I don't want to say the non-regulation because it is regulated. It's just bumped up so that it can make money. I always tell people we want to find what works for you. What
Mhm.
is on the
Exactly.
shelf plain out is not just going to work, where you can't just go in there and say, oh, well, I need this, I need, a sativa, and they just hand you the best one, especially
Mhm.
when it comes to neurologically affected folks. Absolutely not. I'm sorry, but I just cannot in good conscience recommend that. I always start people off with, if they're as a cannabis consultant client, if they're coming to me, I always start with just a CBD tincture just to see if that,
I
creates
agree.
any sort of change.
Sure.
Start dosing out low and slow,
Mhm.
slow and
I
steady
agree.
wins the race,
Right.
right?
No, I agree. I feel like we dismiss CBD a little bit too quickly.
I agree.
And now that we have a new changes occurring with the Farm Bill,
Yep.
it may be a little bit more difficult to do some of these things. So right now, like in Ohio, we're going to be rec any minute now, any second now. Okay.
You're going to get
And
wrecked.
Well, you think IDA is going to beat you?
do
Not IDA. The Drug Administration. Do you think they're going to beat Ohio? Uh-oh.
You mean Schedule 3?
that we were supposed to go recreational September. Now we're upping it to June. I don't know. I mean, it's not going to be June 1st, clearly, but I would say July, August. We'll be there before September. Okay. And already in the last several years, when we first opened, we had CBD flower, ACDC. We had 1-to-1 flower, Shark Shock. It was like 8% CBD, 8% THC. We had another one, Harlequin, which was the same thing, like 13% on each side, right? Now, none of those are available. And I know that we want to get some of these, I consider just ridiculous hemp-derived THC cannabinoid. Like some of these things are absolutely ridiculous and are not meant for good. Okay.
Absolutely.
Give me an
However,
example. When you say
I'm not a big fan of THC8, THCO, HHC. I mean, what is it? THCP, which is supposed to be 13 times binds to the receptors 13 times stronger than regular THC. Regular THC is still delta 9. I mean,
Yeah.
delta THC.
Right.
So that
Delta-9,
one I
right.
don't really have a problem with, because when I have patients, they might be getting some things from the dispensary,
Yeah.
but because we don't have as many medicinal products, and they don't really carry very many CBD products in dispensaries. I'm having them use some CBD products over the counter. Sometimes they're then using, if they don't do well, okay, I don't like Delta 8, and I'm going to contradict myself for 1 second.
That's okay.
They don't do well with Delta 9, THC, dispensary, or otherwise. Delta 8 at low doses, not in that 50 milligrams that they're selling, okay?
Mhm.
But in low doses, they tend to do very well and get a great effect for their conditions, okay?
Mhm.
So that's the only, they need to bring down how they're dosing that, okay? If we get rid of all those, so the new Farm Bill wants to eliminate all hemp-derived cannabinoids except for CBD itself, all elevating, mind-altering cannabinoids except for CBD, right? And that would, first of all, that is 90% of CBD stores and products would just be
They're
gone.
all altered. Yeah. That's what I
Why
was going
would
to
they
say. They're
do
all
that?
altered.
Wait, now I'm having trouble comprehending.
Because the license holders that own the dispensaries are now competing with these products, and they're like, and look, I don't blame them. You have
Right.
paid millions of dollars for your license. You've had to do build out on huge stores, licensing, insurance, employees, all for me. I could just,
You got to go to a separate bank.
I could set banking issue. I could start selling it today with no license, no employees, none of it. I could just say, hey, I'm selling THCA. Come and buy it. I get it. However, I think it would eliminate, being that they also don't want to make medicinal products.
Mhm.
And the way that I help patients is doing a little combination of all of it.
Yep.
I think we would have a problem. And some of that crap does need to go. It's not meant for good. It's meant for bad. Okay. But there's other aspects of it that could be actually really helpful for patients. And everyone is not a dispensary client, even,
Yeah.
you know?
Yeah.
So, I mean, now that means that you have to go to one store for your CBD and another store for a certain aspect when all you want is a gummy.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
Okay.
When literally all you're
Oh,
looking for is like a 5 milligram gummy and you can't find it anywhere.
Right. So you have to now go to a dispensary. So people don't necessarily want to do that. And the beverage business is all hemp derived Delta 9.
yeah.
Yep.
And that is right now a $4 billion business.
Crazy.
And in 10 years is going to be a $45 billion business. You're telling me all of that is going to be wiped away?
Well, knowing the government and history, it probably will. it probably, I don't know. I feel like they don't want it to make sense, right? Like DJ
Yeah.
Khaled, they don't want the cannabis like regulations to make sense because they really don't know how to access it themselves, right? Like they don't know what it is, they don't know what it does, but they don't want to listen to any type of proof or practitioners or people who, live it, who are part of the culture.
It makes your job harder.
It makes my job so much harder, but I think it also makes it more fun because you can find different ways to go around the loopholes, right? I always kind of talk about maybe we could start growing. I don't know. Not everyone has a green thumb. Not everybody has a green thumb. I think it skipped a generation in my family, to be quite honest with you. My mom cannot keep a plant alive. Like I asked her to watch my plants when I moved out, and I don't even know where they're alive anymore. Yeah, I have no idea. But and all my plants are alive. But yeah, I talk about like growing, but also just being intentional, like with what you're going out to find, right? I do terpene tracking with my clients and a reflective practice as well. Just, sitting down, if you're, doing your intake session, just take a second and write down how you feel, right? How did you feel before? How did you feel during? What kind of stuff do you taste, right? Kind of getting all your senses involved. And even like, I feel like that's a form of mindfulness and meditation, which is another thing I want to talk about, the yoga, another way to activate the endocannabinoid system.
Wait, so before you get there, I want you to get back a little bit and just share a little bit about what what is terpene tracking and how do you share that with your patients?
Yeah. So terpene tracking is basically looking at the most prominent terpene in a certain strain and
Mhm.
following that through what strains you like. So let's say, for example, for me, I really like lemon cherry.
Mhm.
Anything cherry, I love it. Love it, love it, love it, love it, love it. And in cherry, there's a lot, any type of cherry strain, there's a
Mhm.
lot of myrcene,
Mhm.
which is a terpene.
Mhm.
So what I did then was try to find other strains that had that same amount of myrcene. Cherries also have myrcene and I believe it's myrcene and limonene in it as
Mhm.
well. So
Mhm.
I look
Right.
for, then I start to look for, okay, let's look for strains with myrcene and limonene in it together. So make sure that they're both
Mhm.
in there and just go through different strains to see if they have those
What source
terpenes.
are you using, like Leafly or?
I'm primarily using Leafly because it's the most accessible.
Mhm.
Some dispensaries, they will have it on the lab report.
Nice.
On the lab report.
Mhm.
Um, but yeah, I usually use Leafly. Leafly's a great source, but sometimes they don't have all the strains.
Right,
How
absolutely.
you
And
how
then
you
I like, in Ohio, there was I don't know how long we did this for, but we were changing the names. So it would be, I don't think we kept doing it, but I know initially there was this push. So let's say it was Blue Dreams in every other part of the
right.
world.
Mhm.
Here it was called something different. So then,
See, I can't. It's too much. It's
Right.
too
That's
much.
been a
so then
problem from the
how do you,
get-go.
right? So yeah, go figure.
That's why I
I don't
say the best thing to do is to look at the terpenes because you can't
I,
not
they
like
don't know
there's
about that. They don't know about that part yet, so they
and that's
can't
the other
mess it up.
thing they don't know either.
Right,
That's the
right.
other thing. So I
Well,
feel
I'm
like
saying, like,
here
the government isn't saying to change that because they don't know about that, right? So they might change the name, but like you said, you can still track the terpenes, which I think is an excellent. That's why I wanted you to share that because it's an excellent way for people to learn what they like. Because a lot
yeah.
of people follow
Absolutely.
THC, right?
If you're interested in learning what you like. If you're interested in learning what you like, because it is a process. I love learning what I like, especially when
Mhm.
it comes to cannabis. Like, I
Yeah.
love just
Well,
getting
what
down to the
cannabis?
nitty-gritty of things, right? The chemicals and
You
stuff.
you have a bud in your hand, you take a whiff, you're
Mhm.
going to feel that in different
Right,
places in the
right.
nasal passage, telling you a whole lot once you tune in and learn a little bit. I had a prostate cancer, and I started looking for myrcene,
Mhm,
humulene,
Mhm.
mhm,
limonene, which I never say right, but beta carotene, 4 or 5 things. Turned out these are things I've already liked. And it was
mhm.
interesting, about before my cancer was diagnosed, I started consuming more black pepper. I've
Mm.
always liked
On your
black pepper.
own? You were doing it
Yeah, just
independent, like, did you know?
reminders, my potatoes and my salad. About the year before it was diagnosed, I somehow my pepper increased when I've always liked a little black pepper. I really
Mhm,
do. I'm light on salt. I like black pepper. I
mhm,
started 4 cranks. And the first couple of times I did it, I'm thinking, come on, there's enough pepper there. I increased
mhm.
my pepper, and then my
You're
potential
frozen.
cannabis
Mhm,
strains, or if you will, or varietals, whatever you want, cultivars, call it what you will.
mhm,
Everything I came across in the literature, some of it from Canna Keys, was basically, here's some of the things you may want. A
Mhm.
lot of it anecdotal, admittedly, but some actual research.
Yeah.
yeah, I love that. I love
You
that.
know,
No, it
and
is
then
definitely the
there's
way to
beta
learn.
carotene right on the top, and humulene,
Mhm.
and CBG.
Yep.
So if you're going to start breeding this out of hemp, I want CBG,
Mhm,
CBN, which usually comes late in the plant, after the flowers start to deteriorate. Another cannabinoid that seems to have properties that help suppress cancer growth.
Yeah.
I don't know about curating, but help suppress the growth. Pretty
yeah, absolutely.
amazing what this plant's potential is. I don't mean to go off on a
No, no, you're fine. No, I did have a question, Nailah, with your research
Mhm.
in presenting this and, the difficulties getting it there.
Mhm.
what conversations have you had with your peers, or have you had more interest from other speech therapists that are saying, hey, can, give me a little pointer on this? Or what, we've talked about the patients, but how has this changed as far as what you've seen with your colleagues?
Yeah, well, even just talking to my peers, like friends, people, I don't know, I'm gonna say closer to my age, but people, a little bit around my age in their 20s and 30s, they're
Mhm.
so open to it. They're like, yeah, this needs to happen. Like,
Mhm.
yeah, tell me more. They really, really, really want to know more. And I'm like, really? You want to know more? Well, they're like, yeah, tell me more. And I'm like, okay, well, I'll tell you some more.
Right.
It's the older generation, the
Mhm.
generation above me. I'm in my 20s right now, so
Mhm.
well, kind of, yes, Michael. And but when I was at I presented at my governing body conference, and
Mhm.
I only got one dirty look, which is good, which I was expecting a lot.
Yeah,
I
well,
only got one dirty look,
right.
but people were very, very receptive. People actually started talking about different things that were happening to them that related to cannabis, and students that they may have worked with, or certain things happening in their districts. We work in a lot of schools, so certain things happening with them.
Mhm.
I get a lot of anecdotal stories, and you know it tells me that this is still important, right? People are still,
Beautiful.
it's happening. You can't ignore that it's
Right,
happening,
that we're
and it's
here.
going to change what your clients look like,
Yeah,
right?
I
It's going
think
to change what they look
it's practicing responsibly to have them at this point. We've got to have this knowledge,
like. Yeah.
and like honestly, we've gone on longer than this is a 30-minute show, and we went a whole out. Yeah,
Get
I
out of
probably
here.
would have shared that, but anyhow.
We can keep going. We can keep going.
But I love your perspective and I love your courage. Because clear, you got to be ready for that one dirty look.
And I'm
Um,
ready.
yeah,
I'm
yeah,
ready.
and there are more to come.
Yeah. Oh, get this. I didn't even tell you guys this. Get this. I actually had a child psychiatrist come to my poster,
Mm,
and we talked about all this. And in my poster, I talk about how pharmaceuticals that are prescribed to people on the spectrum, people with TBIs, ADHD, ADD, like PTSD, all those things, that they have a lot of times a lot of really harmful side effects. And
Yeah.
I didn't know that she was a psychiatrist until after I gave her the whole spiel.
mhm.
And it was really interesting. She was receptive, but it was still like she wasn't ready yet,
Well,
like you're not ready.
I feel like in medicine we're taught a way of thinking.
Yes.
Okay, any like all careers, it's not just what you
Even
learn.
pathologists are taught a way of thinking as well. Yes.
Yeah, you learn a certain way of thinking, right? How you process information, what have you.
Mhm.
And there is a narrowness in medicine
Yes.
that if it's not coming from the powers that be,
What
that
is it?
it is worthless,
Yeah.
right?
Literally, who are you?
And if it is anything holistic, then really, why are
Forget
you
it.
wasting your time,
Yeah.
right? We all
Throw it in
turn
the
our nose
trash.
up at it. And we're in a different world because we're losing patients, we're losing physicians, we're losing nurses. Patients are looking for something much more holistic and at least at the minimum open to other suggestions.
Yeah.
And so I congratulate you because you clearly could stay in your lane, but you said no. Let patients are looking for something different, and there's something that we're missing here. So I congratulate you on that as well. If people wanted to reach out to you, how would they connect?
Yes, you can connect with me on LinkedIn, Nailah Smith, as well as on Facebook. I will say my social media is I took a 2-year break. Well,
Good for
3 years
you. Good
now.
for you. That's why you were able to do the doggone research because you weren't sitting
Right,
there on your
right.
doggone phone. Okay,
Yeah.
that's another show.
That's a whole other show.
Okay, we'll
That's
do
yeah,
that show.
that's
Let's
called
do that.
graduate school trauma.
Let's
Yeah.
do that show without a doubt. Without
That's
a
a different show. But I'm
But
building
yeah,
up
I
my
want to make
social
sure
media
people got
profiles.
this.
I'm building up my social media profiles. So feel free to link out to be there. It's right there in the box.
Right. Absolutely. Well, it's been an absolute pleasure having this conversation with you, and we will definitely have you come back and share more, and definitely with your journey and with your patients. And I've told my speech therapy friends that we're having this conversation today, and so they're going to be watching this later. So thank you so much for sharing. And
Thank you. Thank you for having the platform. It's
yes.
really the platform, just getting the word out there.
Yeah, we'll share and like and subscribe, because that's how we grow, and share with everyone else. And we're excited to have you a part of the Courage in Cannabis family.
Thank you so much for having me. Excited to be here.
Thank you
Let's
for
shake some
allowing me
stuff
to
up.
participate. So good to see you.
Always, Michael, always.
I don't want to, right? After we stop going live, can we talk for a moment or two? I've got a couple.
Yeah.
Okay.
Absolutely. Well, thank you, and we'll see you next time.